Hello listeners, and welcome to this third and final part in the mini-series on the Cadet org. To find out more from Catherine and her writing, please follow the links in the episode description. But for now, here is Catherine.
So, without giving away too much, because I can't wait to read part 2 of this story, how is it that you left the Church of Scientology altogether? And you now do have children and a family, and those things that you couldn't have had if you stayed in the Sea Org, you've been able to have in a very different setting, I imagine, to what you would have had if you left the Sea Org but stayed in Scientology.
Yeah, the journey of how I left Scientology took a few years. At first, I was very dedicated, although I did not go on course. So it's very similar to like when I'm growing in the Sea Org and the Cadet Org, I would never really go on study. I would read books, just not about Scientology, just regular fiction books. So when I'm meeting people, and you'll get to follow my journey in my second book of like what it's like partying with all the young Scientologists in LA. And then I'm working at Delphi Academy, which is like a school that uses Scientology study methods. And my brother, I mentioned, who passed away, he actually gets sick. So this is where things start to crack because they decide to blame me, what they call the why. If there's something called being a suppressive person and a PTS person. PTS is called a potential trouble source. So they're saying, my brother was PTS to me because I had left the
Wow.
Sea Org. I was probably a bad influence. My brother did not say this. Somebody else said it, which is also, if you're going to be like, you have to follow L. Ron Hubbard, like technology correctly, that's not correct. Like the person has to name it themselves anyway. So somebody wrote a report saying they thought because my brother was getting sick a lot they knew he saw me on Sunday mornings because I would drive over there and pick up my family and we'd go have brunch on Sunday mornings, that I was an influence on him. And then the same thing also with my dad. He was making mistakes on post, and somehow I was influencing that because I have voodoo powers or something. But it was very upsetting to me. And when I was told that news by she's actually the woman in the book, the ethics officer, she's the one who calls me in, and she delivers this news and gives me a non-interpolation order, which means I am under an order not to interpolate my family or make them upset. Otherwise, I can be declared a suppressive and lose them forever. And this is all completely out of the blue. So that was devastating. And when that happened, I was dating my current husband now, but he was just my boyfriend. And and this is for anybody who has somebody in a cult, something to think about, is he just asked me what was wrong. He's like, you're normally so happy, something seems off. And I just turned 21. I hadn't heard from my family, so it bothered me a bit that they didn't even call to say happy birthday. And he was like, hey, just so you know, I'm never going to become a Scientologist. Like, it's not against you. It's just, I grew up Christian or Catholic or whatever. Anyway, and he's like, I'm Christian. It's not for me. So you don't have to worry about that. Cause somehow he knew that I had that, like we were talking about, that cognitive dissonance where you don't want to talk negative about Scientology. I didn't want to stop him from ever going up the bridge or finding his own freedom. So I couldn't ever confide in him this horrific thing that Scientology was doing to me right now, which was taking my family and saying I was the reason why my brother was sick. So then I was able to talk to him about it, and that really helped to hear myself say it out loud. But even then, I justified it just saying, like, this woman, Bertha, is just a bad person. Like, she's like a bad seed. It's not the church. But then I brought my husband to the Basics event, and it's like when they just had a new release of this new material, they're always having new releases and everybody has to buy it. And I'm just looking at it through his eyes, and I was like, what? It really started to open my eyes. And then so then you can, in the book, you would see me follow this journey of like the crack has been like, there's a big crack now in my belief system of Scientology. And then what do I do and how do I follow that out and no longer become a Scientologist? And then get to the point now where I'm actually public and speaking out, which is a really scary thing to do because Scientology also will attack people and go after people who speak out on Scientology. But to get from where I was when I left the Sea Org and still happily believing Scientology to where I am now would be in my second book. But I think it's important for me to explain the horrific part of what even drove me to this point is like these things that Scientology can do. And this book was never written as an attack piece. It's just written to show truly what it's like, but they will take this book as an attack book, even though it's not. Like, I think you could say too, right? Like, I try to capture everything, and it's the reader draws their own conclusion, and the conclusion is what it is, because it's just facts. It's just how it was. And on top of that, my parents disconnected from me anyways. They did come back in contact with me before my brother died, and I was able to be with my brother while he was ailing. He got a bone marrow transplant that unfortunately his body rejected, and then he passed. And then down 5 or 6 years down the line, after I've gotten married and I have kids, and my parents would come visit in Minnesota at this point. But then Miriam was on Leah Remini's show, The Aftermath, and because she's my best friend, they disconnected from me. So I hadn't even written the book, nothing. I had not spoken publicly about Scientology, and yet this they did it again, where they disconnected from me. And this time it's been 6 years. So that was like, I'm gonna write this book because I've been thinking about it. I had written it all down like in my early 20s. I want to tell the story of the ranch and what happened to all of us cadets. And I thought I could tell that story. And it's just funny because the Sea Org or Scientology literally shot themselves in the foot by taking away my family, because they had that power over me where I was remaining silent because they had my parents and I had that connection, and then they took that connection away, and I was like, okay, well, now this story will be out there.
Yeah.
And here I am now speaking out on your podcast. I've been on what's called SPTV, other podcasts and interviews, and I'm like, oh my gosh, who would have thought? I never thought I would be doing this.
I don't know. It kind of makes sense when again, it's like that rebellion coming through. The spark that you've always had to stand up for yourself as well as a young person that had nobody else to stand up for you in rooms where you're surrounded by adults who all have these significant roles wherever you're placed, telling you need to be a certain way and do a certain thing and stop behaving in a certain way, and you just basically say F you. And I just
Yeah.
like that courage that you had as a young person is so inspiring, and protected you so many times, I imagine, in your journey throughout these various places that you lived when you were a part of Scientology and the various parts of Scientology. But you mentioned that your husband, before you got married, he was your boyfriend who wasn't in Scientology, so he would be known as a WOG. Is that the right term?
Yeah. Yeah, it's perfect.
I am also a WOG, and I wear
Yes.
that badge proudly. A WOG is a
Mhm.
person that's like a worldly person, somebody in the world that's just going about their life without the, air quotes, gift of Scientology.
Yeah, and it turns out, because when I talked to John Atack, he said that it's like a derogative term in the 70s or 60s or whatever that was, that he picked that word, which is super disgusting.
Mhm.
That's what he used to describe people who aren't Scientologists. But yeah, so when I met Ryan, okay, like it's just so funny because he was like, "Oh yeah, I went to high school. Yeah, I was on the football team. Yeah, I was on the prom court." I was like, "Who is this guy?" Like, it was totally like what I pictured. Um, like a typical life. And his parents, are middle class, and like we go and visit them in Minnesota, and it's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm in Pleasantville." So to me, it was funny. Like, all these things about him felt like what I envisioned, you
Yeah,
know, uh my boyfriend would be. But I was like, but too bad you're a wog.
yeah,
So
yeah.
like,
That's
I'm not
so
gonna marry
funny.
you. And
When you
then
talk
obviously,
about the person that you wanted to go to a typical high school and have typical high
hmm
school experiences and meet a boy who's on the football team, and it's so funny then that you meet this person who's basically like a cardboard clown of all of those things you daydreamed about as a young person. That's so funny.
it really is. It's like I wrote him into existence in my journals or something. But he is a very sweet, sweet man, and that was also something that I really, really appreciated, is like that sweetness, because as you could see, we're very hard. Even as cadets, we teased each other mercilessly, like children, you know. And then in the Sea Org, like there's not a lot of sympathy there or empathy. And like he is just a really nice guy, even to this day. He's my husband, and I love him so much. But he was able to have these conversations with me about Scientology because he's empathetic and he can listen. He didn't judge me for being. He knew it was a cult, but he wasn't going to say that to me because he knew I wasn't ready to hear that, and I had to figure that out on my own. So to have somebody that is, if anybody has somebody in a cult, like just listen to that person. Maybe you can ask questions, but never do it in an attacking manner because their walls will go up. And so the Ryan was able to do that. And eventually, after a couple of years, as I was coming out of Scientology, then it was like, oh, like, you know, then we got engaged like 6 years down the road, and then married, and then had kids. And I'm like, wow, living the fairy tale.
If you were to have recruited your husband into Scientology, what would your wedding have looked like from that perspective? Did you ever go to a like a Scientology wedding and get a feel of
Mhm.
what that might have looked like?
Oh yeah. Yeah, they have like the guy wears a robe and then he has a huge Scientology cross because a Scientology cross looks like a regular cross and then an extra X over it. So the eight dynamics is because eight dynamics is something they believe in. It's like where they compartmentalize life. So they would have that big cross and then they would have L. Ron Hubbard's ministry book that he wrote and then they would say like picture these rings. Everybody draw an ARC triangle in those rings, which is affinity, reality, and communication. So it's just the lingo of Scientology, all in the same thing of like matching each other up to get married. And it's like everybody postulate that they will do well. Um, that's like I'm trying to like there would just be a lot of Scientology lingo, but it would be the same thing of like walking down the aisle and you'd have people standing there. So I was in a couple Scientology weddings when I was still Scientologist. So glad that I never had the conviction in Scientology to try to convince Ryan. And I honestly never ever even occurred to me to try to recruit him in. And then when all that stuff was happening with my brother, and then he was with me by my side when my brother slowly, you know, he did die a year or two into our relationship. But to have Ryan was like amazing. But it never occurred to me to recruit him. And I think that was because I never really, even though I was a Scientologist, what did I have that had helped me with? Nothing really.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that I never, if he wanted to join on his own, great. But it wasn't something that I ever tried to do myself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I wonder if in your subconscious, or maybe even had this a thought, you didn't want to be associated with the moral injury of recruiting somebody into Scientology as well, knowing that you would have been responsible for whatever that person goes on to do, however much money they spend, however many courses they go on, whether they then decide that they want to give their life to clearing the planet and join the Sea Org. Was that ever a thought that occurred to you?
You know, it's definitely possible. I think I never truly fully believed in Scientology, so I never ever tried to recruit people or like I was just never gung ho about it. And I'm like, thank goodness, because yeah, that would be horrible if I had recruited somebody into it and they were still in it to this day and they disconnected from me because now I'm evil. So I definitely think there was some part of me that never fully, and that is what helped me leave. Like I was me and like Miriam eventually left too, but it took her another couple of years. And then like me and Leslie is a year or two older than me. So I was one of the young, really young to have left when I left the Sea Org, and like everybody else started to filter out later. Some of them were like in their early 20s when they left the Sea Org. So then they still have to work through that. And then it's like, and then some of my cadet friends are still Scientologists, or they're not Scientologists, but they can't say anything because they can't lose, they don't want to lose their family, which is
Mm-hmm.
so sad. So like they just, once my book came out, unfriend, block on me, you know, on social media. And it's just, and I know why they do it. And I'm like, it's just sad. And some of them I wrote messages with like, hey, you're in my book, just so you know, like under pseudonym. I hope you'll give it a read. And no response. But I'm like, I'm like, maybe they will. Who knows? Give them the option.
I wonder if your parents will ever come across a copy of the book, or whether they know that it exists. And if they
Yeah.
did, would they try and read it without anybody finding out? It's an interesting thought. Is it something that you've paid any mind to?
Yeah, I finally managed to call my mom 6 months, like, so I hadn't talked to her in 6 years, but somebody saw my interview with Aaron Smith Levin on his channel, and they reached out to him through Nora, and Nora Ames, she also texted me too through Aaron. Anyway, so I was able to talk to her, and I did tell her about my book. So it's there. She knows about it. I told her it's called The Bad Cadet. She kind of had a little mini heart attack there, but on the phone. Um, so the phone call was really sweet, and she was like, "Oh, how are you guys? How are the kids?" It's so sad that she acted like it was not a big deal that she hadn't talked
Hmm.
to us in 5 years. And then I was like, "Hey, let's get together. Like, why have we not seen you guys?" And she was like, "Well, are you still connected to Miriam?" And I'm just like, "Oh my gosh." I'm like, "It doesn't matter if I am. Like, we could still be together as a family. We could believe in different things. Like, people do that all the time. They believe in different politics. Like, let's agree to just put that aside and be together as a family." And she's like, "Well, I have to check with my ethics officer," is what
Oh,
she said. So when she said that, I was like, "Okay, then if she does that, then they're gonna tell them about my book. I'd rather she hear it from me." So I told her about my book, and she was like, "You had a little like mini," and I was like, "Mom, are you okay?" She's like, "Yes." And she's like, "Is it attacking Scientology?" And of course, that's her first question. And I'm like, instead of being like, "You wrote a book,
oh, that's
congratulations."
amazing! A
Yeah.
whole manuscript, a whole book that's in print, that's published, that is such a nice book to hold. When you sent me a copy, I was like, yes, this is a good one. You know, when you hold a book in your hands and you're like, yep, it's good. It feels great.
Oh my gosh, the feeling when I wrote it, when I got it, I was like, "It's a real book." Like, it's like, and it's funny because you don't know how thick or thin it'll be till it's printed. I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's the perfect size." I was so
Yeah,
proud.
yeah,
Yes, the amount of pride. So you would think that my mom would have that, but no. I mean, I knew she wouldn't, but you would hope that she would. But she was just like, "Is it attacking Scientology?" I said, "No." I'm like, "It's called the Bad Cadet because you know how I was such a bad cadet." And she kind of chuckled. And then I was like, "But listen, like, I'm here. Like, I love you. We should try to get together." And she's like, "Okay, I love you too." And then the next day, the phone was disconnected. So I haven't heard from her since. But I'm trying to think of, I don't know. I would like them to come out. I think so. There was when my mom and my dad and my sister decided to not speak with me, and also by association, my brother, who didn't do anything, and it's not his best friend that was on Leah Remedy show. We didn't do anything, but they're I think they're like closing down the hatches in Scientology and like trying to get rid of any external influences, like hardcore. And there was a while where I kept trying. I was writing letters. I was sending flowers on Mother's Day, on birthdays. No response, no response. They sent out a holiday card with just them on the picture to all of our relatives. Me and
wow.
Jason aren't on it. Like, it was very hurtful. I got a therapist because I was like, this is like, I need to decompress. I need to like talk about what's happening here. And then I kind of just let it go. I was like, it's out of my control. It's their choice. Hopefully they'll reach out. And I worked on my book, raising my children, and just having my happy life with my family. But now I think I'm to the point where I'm like, I kind of want to like make more of an effort and try to get them out and like enjoy their last days just living. And like, what's the
Yeah,
point of them wasting away there? But how to do that is the question. So
yeah.
I'm starting to think about these things, and yeah. I
Well,
mean, they
I
don't
guess,
like, if anybody watches or listens to this in the Sea Org, it's like, why do you keep the elderly there? Like, they're not even working anymore. So it's like, just let them go. It
yeah.
would be nice.
The idea of medical neglect and the amount of stories that you hear of people passing away within Scientology because they were declined medical care, forcibly withheld from accessing medical care. These are some of the more extreme cases that you can read about on the internet, of people being locked in rooms and given
Hmm.
weird, so
Lisa
like
McPherson and so on.
yeah, weird concoctions of L. Ron Hubbard's idea of like vitamins mixed with something else will cure people of cancer. And of course, that must be something that concerns you as a person that has elderly parents in Scientology. But it's my understanding that if you are clear within Scientology, you're not supposed to get sick. So, do you think that the idea of blaming you for your brother becoming ill was you were used as a scapegoat because it pokes holes in the teachings of Scientology?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's the same. Like there's so many people that people have talked about. There's a lot of cancer in the Sea Org that people have cancer, and it's probably because they're not getting physicals. Because at certain ages you have to start monitoring everything. And if they're not going to the doctor, then you will like you can catch cancer before it's, stage one, stage two, whatever. So I think it's just that medical neglect, and yeah, make that make sense. Like, why is there so many people dying of cancer who are Scientologists who are Sea Org members? It's because that like going to a doctor is kind of like you don't really do that until you're actually sick. Whereas you need to be doing preemptive measures always and just getting physicals and not it's like, oh my gosh, I'm actually like coughing up blood. Like now you're too late. So
Yeah.
it's yeah. So for my parents, I'm definitely wondering. They said that they were doing well and that they go to their doctor appointments, but they also have a policy of good roads, good weather. Like if you're talking to a suppressive person, you only say good stuff.
Ooh.
And so I'm like, how much do I know is true? How are my parents doing? I would love to see them in person and know for sure that they're okay. And we'll see. Yeah.
Well, I hope so. I truly hope so. I mean, it would be great to hear from you one day. And, I guess I've got material for a third book, if this big change happens. And I really do hope that that's the case for your sister
Mhm.
as well.
Yeah, and
Um,
the nice thing is my sister is there. I tell myself that she will keep an eye on them because I think
yeah,
that's true for her. So I'm like, at least my sister is there. So that keeps me a little bit less stressed. Because I
yeah.
do think she like would be like, "Hey, are you going to the doctor?" Like she would advocate for them. So yeah, but it doesn't change that I still would like to see them. I would like to see her. I'm like, oh my gosh, come on out, come and join me. That would be amazing. We'll figure it out. Or maybe we won't, but I'm gonna see what happens.
The last few pages of the book had kind of a shocking revelation for me just before I got to the end. And I think that I knew about this anyway. Um, but it was strange to hear it from the perspective of somebody that was born and raised in this environment and didn't really have a choice. The incurring costs and charges that people have for accessing or being basically told that you have no other
Isn't it?
choice but to go on auditing courses. I've read so much about Leah Remini's, being told that she has to sit in a room for 12 to 18 hours and do auditing and then be charged like, something wild like
Hundreds of
$10,000 an
thousands.
hour.
Yeah.
So I think I knew that this was something that existed, but I never thought about it from the perspective of somebody that was a child that, as a young person that's told you, you're going to have to do these courses, you're going to have to do this auditing and still like incur these charges. So I wondered if you could just talk the listeners through how that works and how much money you just kind of left the Sea Org and you're like, oh, I owe a debt after all of my manual labor and everything that you contributed to the existence of these places you lived in, you somehow left with a debt to the Church of Scientology.
Mhm. Yeah, it's absolutely wild. So L. Ron Hubbard defines a freeloader as somebody who joins the Sea Org and takes courses or auditing and works in the Sea Org, but then when they leave, you have to pay back for all those courses and auditing. So that just deters a lot of people from wanting to leave because they don't want to even have that debt. Because imagine if you were trained up to be a class 5 auditor, which is like like 30, $50,000, $60,000, 70, I don't even know. So expensive. And then you left. So I had cadets who were put onto training when they were 13 and 14 years old who did reach that status. So when they left, they owed $50,000, which is ridiculous. They didn't choose that path. And they were like doing courses that they were assigned to do for the Sea Org. Now, luckily, me being me, I did not go on course because I had kept sneaking off to my parents' room to read instead. So I had only the EPF to pay for, which, believe it or not, was $5K, which is also ridiculous. $5,000 that I was supposed to pay back. So when I was a good Scientologist in LA, I would give them like $5 here and there just to say I was paying off my freeloader debt. So then I could be like in good standing somewhat. And luckily, I think the most I paid out was probably like $50. But eventually, I think somebody like found out that cadets were having to pay these freeloader debts, and I think they canceled them out, but I don't know for sure. But still, regardless, some of my friends did pay them off. Like we're all like barely surviving in LA, and they're giving all their money over to the church for courses that they were forced to do, or not forced, but we were like told we had to do because that's all we knew, and that's what we were assigned. Pretty
That's
wild.
so wild. I mean, 13, 14 years old, taking, the class 5 auditing course. I don't even think nobody understands the value of money at that age, let alone somebody that's raised in a place where you work 12 hours a day and you get paid like 20 bucks a week. So it's wild to me that children at such a young age are being thrown into like mountains of debt. Like it doesn't it doesn't like compute. It was
It's
like
so wild.
it would be like a parent saying, in the world, oh, you lived with me for 18 years and then you moved out for uni, so here's all the money that you owe me for all the years that you lived in my house.
Yeah.
It's
No, it
doesn't make
just goes
sense.
to show how money hungry the church is and how little they care about people. Like like it's just wild and very horrible. And I'm like, I feel bad for the cadets who did pay off the freeloader debt because that's like money they could have put towards their future.
Yeah. I mean, how did I know that the wealth and the power and the status that Scientology has, and the collusion with certain police departments and all other mad things that makes Scientology
Hmm.
at least sound like a criminal organization. Um, it,
I would say it's
would
definitely a criminal organization. Yeah.
would they be able to enforce this freeloader debt somehow? Is there like I know you sign $1 billion contract. Is this what it's all written into? Because I know that Scientology has a way of just kind of bulldozing people with lawsuits and all sorts of other things to force people's hands, really.
No, luckily, I don't think they try to sue and do that. I think what you just have the external pressure of people like, have you paid off your freeloader debt? Are you back on course? So if you're somebody whose whole family and friends are all Scientologists, you have that pressure of like wanting to be with the group. And eventually, if you're not gonna do it, like they could declare you and you'd like lose your family and friends. Um, so I think that's like where they take it's just more of the like external pressure on on the person wanting to be in good standing. So then they pay it off and then they want to go on course and pay for that. And then they're taking out credit cards to pay for courses. It's horrible. Yeah. And I'm sure people have taken out credit cards actually to pay off their freeloader debt. I bet,
Mm.
and then they have a debt with like 20% interest or
An
28%
actual
or
debt,
whatever.
like a real debt that has
Yeah. And that one they would
consequences.
get. Yes.
I mean,
They
of
would be
course,
very liable for.
I don't mean like there aren't consequences of everything you've just explained there. The kind
No,
of
I understand.
the pressure cooker of everything, but repossession of your house and your possessions and your
Mhm.
property, and then being blacklisted and not being able to access any more credit, which could mean not paying for childcare or hospital fees and all sorts of other types of consequences, in comparison to a freeloader debt. Just to clarify for anybody listening that
Mhm.
would pick up on that. So I guess that kind of leaves us to ask you where people can find a copy of The Bad Cadet, and any other things you have in the works, and when we can expect a kind of a precautionary release date for book number 2.
You can definitely expect my book number 2 probably actually I have no clue on the date, but I would say like 2 years is my goal. My kids are going back to school soon. That's when I can really get the ball rolling. I've gotten a couple chapters in, but I've got one, like I now know how to write a book, which helps. So I think this one will come a lot smoother. If you want to get The Bad Cadet, it's available on Amazon in print and then everywhere for ebook. And Audible will be coming soon about October. So follow me at the Bad Cadet if you'd rather get Audible and you want to wait for that. You can follow me at the Bad Cadet on Twitter or Instagram, and I will let everyone know when the Audible version is out. And also, you can always DM me there. I talk to people in there all the time who read my book, and it's always fun.
Have you had
Yeah.
some really wonderful feedback from people that have picked up a copy?
Yes, it's been so amazing. Okay, my cadet friends were amazing. So some of them I had offered for them to read the manuscript and they're like, "No, I don't want to go back there." They don't want to read back this year, you know? But when they're like, "I'll read it when the book comes out." And then some read it and they're in my acknowledgments who were on the PF with me or the Cadet org and they loved it already. But then so the ones who hadn't read it when they read the Bad Cadet were like sweet, so sweet, like literally in tears over it. They're like, "You captured our childhood, you validated our experience." Like, and they're like, or they'd be like, "That scene had me laughing." Like when I'm like describing like a teacher or like when I'm flipping somebody off, they're like, "You're so bad, Catherine." Like I remember that. So like a lot of joy too from it because like we both talked about, I do keep all of the child silliness in there along with all of the darkness. It just really, I think I captured like that kind of world that we were in. And so to get that feedback has been amazing. And then for people who are not Scientologists who have been reading it, they write to me like, "This was like, weirdly enough, your childhood was like growing up in my abusive family's household about the rules and control and how they would doubt things." So it's been interesting in that sense that it's kind of more of a universal book, which is what I was hoping for. You were talking about how I tried to write it in a way that was accessible to anybody. It was very intentional. I was like, I'm not going to do a glossary. I'm just going to try to describe what's happening or the words so that anyone could read it. And it's been so amazing. And people are getting like fired up about Scientology, saying like, "It shouldn't be a religion," like when they DM me. So I'm like, this is good because the more people who know that, the more we can get rid of that religious status, I hope, one day, because millions of dollars are being hoarded by the Church of Scientology that can go back into the community instead
Yeah.
would be amazing, and back into schools and education. Yeah.
Well, you've offered validation to others through your writing, and others have been validated by reading your writing. So it's all amazing. And I so highly recommend The Bad Cadet to everybody who is looking for their next book to read, their next memoir, their next educational piece on Scientology. Anybody that's looking for something to read, The Bad Cadet is the book that you should pick up next. Are you narrating the audiobook?
Yes, I'm narrating it myself.
That's so exciting. I love it when an author narrates their own memoir, because when there are parts of like singing and when there are, when you're mocking somebody, you can really hear the way that it would have been said. And I just think that that's
Yeah.
really, really exciting. So maybe I will listen through the book a second time when it's available on Audible. So that's really exciting. And by the time that this episode is released, perhaps we will have access to that, or I can direct people in the episode description where they can pick up physical copies, where they can pick up ebooks, and where they can expect to find the audiobook when it is released. So thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you for sending me copies of your book. Thank you for sitting down to write your experiences, to offer more education and insight to people like myself, to others that grew up in the Cadet org, to Scientologists who might be questioning whether they want to stay or not, and what could be out there for them if they did leave, and all of the difficult decisions that people have to weigh up when working out what they're going to do. It's such an incredibly written book. I really loved everything that you were able to capture and all the nuances and details that you went into, and just making it easy to read, because Scientology is not easy and L. Ron Hubbard is not easy, and his writing and his madness and his acronyms and everything is not easy, but you really made it feel like it was. So thank you so much for your writing, and thank you for your time today as well. It's been so great to sit down and chat.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. And I really, really appreciate how much you appreciate my book. It really means so much to me. So thank you. And thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks, Catherine. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye bye.
That is the end of this week's mini-series on Scientology's Cadet org with Catherine Spallino. Please follow the links in the episode description and get yourself a copy of her amazing memoir, The Bad Cadet, Growing Up in the Church of Scientology's Sea Organisation. And to get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault Podcast.